Take a breath with me. Tonight, I'm telling you how a single awkward moment with my roommate turned a quiet life into a brave, honest love. Picture a small apartment, a humming kettle, and two men who thought they were just sharing rent. One clumsy mistake sent my secrets into the open air, like sheets on a clothesline, and nothing was the same again. If your heart has ever tiptoed around its own truth, this is your sign to listen closer. I'm Noah. He's Caleb. And the moment we most wanted to forget taught us how to finally begin. Together, if stories that honor the heart speak to you, tap subscribe, like, and share this video. Leave a comment about a moment that changed you. It helps others feel less alone. New, gentle, hopeful episodes each week. Ready? Settle in, breathe deep, and come walk with us. Through this story, I moved to Boston in late September when the air felt like a cool hand on a fevered forehead. I'd taken a position at a teaching hospital not far from the river, the kind of place where the morning light slants perfectly across the lobby and the coffee always smells a little burnt in a comforting way. My hours were unpredictable. Nights, weekends, sometimes both. The hospital was a home for many, and in those fluorescent-hummed hallways, I learned to listen with my whole attention. But home, the place where my shoes waited by the door, that was a third-floor walk-up in Jamaica Plain with a crooked banister and a small balcony facing a maple tree. The apartment had 2 bedrooms and a sunlit kitchen with a stubborn stove that needed coaxing, like an old friend who preferred gentle insistence over force. I found the room on a community board the week before I started, answered an ad that read, "Quietish teacher seeks considerate roommate. Plants, books, and a well-behaved coffee maker included." That teacher was Caleb. We met at the corner cafe, where he arrived with a reusable mug and a smile that reached his eyes. "I'm Caleb," he said, extending a hand that felt warm and steady. He taught American history to high schoolers in Dorchester and coached the debate team on Tuesdays. He described the apartment with a careful, practical tenderness. "The water pressure's good, the street's calm at night, and the neighbors bake banana bread you can smell through the vents." He left space for my questions. It told me as much about him as any of his words. I liked the way he looked at me when I spoke, attentive, curious, kind, like he was trying to memorize the map of my day. Some people listen to respond. He listened to know. If you've ever been in a hospital, at 3 a.m., you understand what a difference that makes. I signed the lease that afternoon, and by the following weekend, my boxes were stacked in the hallway like Tetris pieces, waiting for their right places. There are rhythms you learn when you live with someone. Caleb's alarm chimed at 6:15 a.m., with a sound like a friendly bird. Mine rang at odd hours, and sometimes I'd slip out before dawn, lacing shoes in the dark to spare him the light. He brewed coffee with the focus of a scientist and left a post-it on the counter if he made extra. "Noah, take what you need." I liked to cook soups that simmered all afternoon and tasted better the next day, a comfort carried forward. He kept his plants well watered but not fussy, and every Saturday he wiped the leaves as if to apologize for the dust. We established small rituals. On Wednesdays, I'd bring home oranges from the market and we'd slice them after dinner, the kitchen, filling with a bright smell that made winter feel like a gentle misunderstanding. On Fridays, he played vinyl records while he graded papers, and the apartment took on a warm, crackling heartbeat. Once, while Sam Cooke drifted through the hallway, he looked up and said, "You know, the trick with teenagers is they can tell if you're pretending." He grinned. The trick with adults is the same. He had a way of saying things without forcing them to be taken as advice. I kept my stories neatly folded, like shirts in a drawer. At the hospital, patients told me about pain and fear and hope. I gave them steadiness and time. At home, I gave Caleb my best polite self. I asked about his students and laughed at his jokes and did the dishes exactly the way he preferred. Rinsed first, then loaded. It felt safe to be precise. It felt safer not to be fully known. This was not because of anything Caleb did. It was because of how quiet I'd taught myself to be. Years earlier, when I first came out, the ground under me reshaped like ice breaking and refreezing. Some friends were anchors, some, well, drifted. I learned to share carefully. Living with a man I didn't know yet, I pressed pause on the parts of me that wanted to run ahead. All the while, he was simply himself. Warm, patient, occasional keeper of puns that made me groan and then smile. He didn't push. He didn't pry. He just asked, "How was your day?" and waited for what I chose to offer. If you'd looked in our window that first month, you might have said we were brothers or colleagues or strangers perfectly playing, the parts of roommates who respect each other's towels. We hooked our keys on the same little rack by the door. We traded recommendations, documentaries from me, novels from him. I noticed the careful way he treated small things. A chipped mug, the drafty window, my scrubs left to dry near the heater after a double shift. He draped them properly, no comment, just care. It was the season of small kindnesses. I kept spare batteries because his classroom clock never kept time. He learned to cook rice the way my grandmother did, with a dish towel under the lid to hold, in the steam. We didn't talk about our dating lives, or rather our non-dating lives. He'd been single for a while after a long on-again, off-again relationship that had left him cautious but unbitter. I had been trying to be brave and, frankly, failing. I told myself I needed to settle into the job, into the city, into myself. Sometimes, after a hard shift, I'd fall onto the couch and stare at the ceiling as if it owed me answers. Caleb would put the kettle on and ask softly, "Tea?" It's amazing how healing one word can be when it's offered without a hint of impatience. We'd sit with our mugs and let the day cool down. He talked about lesson plans, about the kid who argued that jazz and hip-hop are cousins, about the girl who wanted to be a judge because judges can throw flags on unfair moments. I told him schools are hospitals for the future. He said hospitals are schools where the tests matter more. He didn't flinch when I brought home stories that were heavy. He held them carefully, the way you hold a sleeping child who shouldn't be startled. And when the stories were too heavy for words, he didn't ask me to speak. He put a record on and let Ella Fitzgerald say what I couldn't. Looking back, I can trace the breadcrumbs. The way his eyes softened when I laughed. The way I noticed. His hands when he stirred the sauce, how steady they were, how sure. The way he'd wait up if I texted, "Late shift, be home after midnight," just to make sure I got in safe. If you're older or if you've loved, you know the symptoms, the smile that lingers in the other room, the extra care taken with your hair when you both meet in the morning, as if impressing him is a ritual you keep even when he's the only audience. None of that meant we were ready to say it. The heart understands long before the mouth catches up. This, too, is a truth I learned in medicine. We treat symptoms and then the cause reveals itself. We treat ourselves kindly and then the truth speaks. I learned the tightrope walk of queer. Crushes in straight-passing spaces. You notice, you care, you ask yourself a dozen times, "Is this in my head?" Then you catch him watching you tug a jar lid loose, and he looks away with a smile that tries not to mean anything. You tell yourself a story where none of this matters. You imagine bringing a date home and measuring his reaction for clues. You picture him doing the same. In the end, you do nothing because doing nothing seems less dangerous than getting it wrong. Caleb, for his part, was gentle and attentive and entirely himself. He noticed when I switched shampoos because the scent reminded me of the ocean. He layered an extra blanket over the couch when the nights turned cold. He teased me about my intense love for grocery lists and then started making them with me, categorized by aisle like a map through the week. We were building something. We didn't have a name for it yet. It happened on a Sunday evening in late November, the kind of Sunday that wears slippers and speaks softly. The apartment was tidy. The maple tree out front had let go of most of its leaves. I had worked a day shift, unusual for me, and I got home just before dusk, thinking I'd cook chili and catch up on laundry. Caleb was in his room grading essays about the Bill of Rights. I could hear the faint scratch of his pen through the door. To explain what happened next, I need you to know that I keep voice memos. It started in residency, when I realized some days were so packed with feelings that if I didn't pour them, somewhere they'd overflow at the edges. I'd record thoughts on my phone, then listen back during a walk, like a calm, future version of myself was reading a map I'd drawn in the moment. That night, I had recorded something after leaving the hospital parking lot, something I needed to hear myself say. In the living room, I tapped the memo. The phone connected to our Bluetooth speaker, the one Caleb used for records, and I used for podcasts. Without my noticing, the volume was up. My own voice filled the apartment, clear as a bell. Memo to self, I heard myself say, in that careful tone I use when I'm trying not to scare my own truth away. You're allowed to feel what you feel. You've been watching him for weeks, listening to the careful way he cares for the world, and you're not imagining it. You're falling for Caleb. There. You said it. Nothing's required of him. Nothing's required of you. Just honesty. I froze. So did the house. The kettle hissed like a sympathetic bystander. Then I heard a soft thud from Caleb's room and the creak of his door opening. My heart sprinted without moving. If you've ever accidentally sent an email before it was ready, multiply that by 100 and set it to a soundtrack of your own voice. That was the moment. Caleb stepped into the hallway, papers still in his hand. His eyes found the speaker, then me, then the phone. He didn't pretend he hadn't heard. He didn't smile to make it easier. He just stood there, gaze gentle, 1,000 thoughts crossing his face like clouds trying out different shapes. I fumbled for the screen and hit pause. The apartment exhaled. I thought briefly and vividly of becoming invisible. There is a special kind of silence that follows an unplanned truth. It isn't empty. It's crowded with every possible next sentence. I took a breath and wished I had practiced this moment in a mirror. I wished for a handbook called How to Stand Still when you've just pressed your own secret through a speaker. If such a book exists, I've never seen it in any hospital waiting room. Caleb moved first. He set his papers on the console table by the hallway and leaned against the door frame. "Hey," he said very softly. "Noah." I couldn't decide. Where to look? At him? At the floor? At the plant in the corner that suddenly seemed like a witness? I did what I've coached 100 patients to do. I named what I was feeling, even if only to myself. Fear, relief, humiliation, hope. The words lined up like puzzle pieces. None of them ready to click. "I'm so sorry," I said, and as soon as I did, it felt wrong. Sorry for feeling? Sorry for not telling him sooner? Sorry for intruding on his evening with my heart? He shook his head. "Don't be sorry," he said. He took a careful step closer, like he was approaching a bird on a windowsill. "Are you okay?" The question rearranged the furniture inside. Me. It was the right question. "I think I will be," I said, not entirely sure it was true. My training kicked in, ridiculous and comforting. Assess, stabilize, communicate. I didn't mean to. "To play that," I said. "I make these weird notes to myself, and I guess the Bluetooth connected." I almost laughed at the absurdity of technology as matchmaker. "I'm not asking anything of you." He nodded, his eyes steady. "I heard that part," he said. A small smile dared to appear. "You have a very soothing voice, by the way. 10 out of 10. Would listen again." It felt like a rope had been tossed to me. I took it. "Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Teacher?" "Mr. Teacher is off duty," he said. "But Caleb is here." We stood in that tender corridor between what had been and what might be. He looked like he wanted to say something and was afraid of choosing the wrong words. I recognized the look because I felt it too. "Do you want to go for a walk?" he asked finally. "It's cooler outside. Might help us both think." I blinked. A walk. Simple, human, kind. "Yes," I said. "Please." He grabbed our 2 jackets from the hook, his olive green, mine navy, and held mine out the way you might hold a door. It felt ceremonial. We stepped into the evening. Boston in November is a lullaby hum of distant traffic and sidewalk leaves. We walked side by side, not touching, not hurrying, just moving forward with the small courage of our feet. It's an old clinical truth. Motion changes emotion. I told a version of this to anxious patients sometimes. Tonight, I told it to myself, silently. For the first block, we talked about nothing. The chill, the church on the corner with the new ramp for wheelchairs, the way the sky looked like a wool blanket pulled up to the city's chin. Then Caleb said, "Can I ask you a question? And if the answer is, I don't want to talk about it, that's okay." I nodded. "How long have you felt like that?" He didn't force the word love. He didn't even say crush. Like that was good medicine. "A little while," I said. "Longer than is convenient. Shorter than is reckless." He smiled, and we both stopped near a storefront with fogged glass and a hand-painted sign advertising guitars and good advice. "And what were you planning to do?" he asked, tilting his head. "Excellent question," I said. Denial seemed like a polite option, as did moving to Montana. He laughed, and the sound loosened something in my chest. "Mostly I was planning to be your friend and recalibrate." He nodded, taking that in. He looked up at a string of lights crossing the street like a whispered celebration. "I should tell you something," he said, hands in his pockets. "If we're going, to be honest." "I advocate for honesty," I said, grateful for something familiar to grasp. "I've felt something too," he said, glancing at me quickly, then away. I didn't know if it was fair to notice, or if I was reading kindness as interest, because that's a trap I've fallen into before. I didn't want to misinterpret the way you care, for everyone, as a particular kind of care for me. I felt simultaneously the urge to hug him and to buy him the world's largest cup of tea. "That is a very Caleb thing to say," I told him. "Careful and precise and so very you." He shrugged, a little bashful. "I guess I wanted to spare you the discomfort of this." "This," I echoed, gesturing vaguely to the entire evening. "We are very considerate people. And yet," he said. And yet, I agreed. We stood there drinking in the mutual relief of not standing opposite a closed door. Eventually, we kept walking. The wind nudged us back toward home. At the corner, he touched my sleeve, just a brush. It was the gentlest contact, and if my life had a heart monitor, the line would have softened and hummed. Back in the apartment, Caleb made tea. He chose chamomile as if that were obvious, which it was. We sat at the table like 2 surgeons planning, a careful operation. Honesty is a skill. We decided to practice it with both hands. "So," he said, "what do we do now?" I smiled. "We keep liking each other, and we try not to set the kitchen on fire." He laughed. "I can commit to that," I added, more seriously. "I don't want to rush. I don't want to make our home feel unsafe if it isn't what we hope." He nodded, his teacher brain clearly organizing thoughts into bullet points. "Agreed. We can make some guardrails. No overnight guests until we know what we are. No keeping feelings in a drawer until they go stale. Weekly check-ins, like household meetings, but feelings included." "The feelings meeting," I said, pretending to jot it on a calendar. "Sundays at 7? He looked relieved, which made me feel safer than any declaration could have. Sundays at 7. We set other small boundaries. We'd keep dating off our phones for a while. We'd try a first date, but at a place we could leave without a post-mortem if it went poorly. We'd tell a couple close friends, not make ourselves a public project. We'd keep caring for the dishes exactly the same. Real life would continue. We wouldn't turn into a movie montage just because we'd said words out loud. He reached across the table. "Is it okay if I hold your hand?" he asked. Even now, my heart warms remembering the care in that question. "Yes," I said. Our hands met softly, palms both a little colder than they should have been. The feeling was warm, and not just at our fingers. It extended up my arm like light, finding a hallway it had never explored. We sat like that for a while, the chamomile steam rising, the city going about its business beyond us. I thought about my patience, about how honesty often brings peace even when it complicates logistics. This was that. Simpler, harder, kinder. Our first feelings meeting happened that same night, 2 notepads sitting empty on the table, like we might take minutes if one of us said anything profound. Instead, we spoke like neighbors trading recipes. What works? What doesn't? What we're still trying to figure out. I went first. I told him about Daniel, my college boyfriend who wore kindness like a coat and then disappeared when the weather turned warm. I told him about my family, a mix of tender and complicated, who loved me in the ways they knew how. My mother worried. My father asked careful questions and then sent me articles. My little sister had known before I did, the way a nurse notices a patient's color change before the monitor blares. His acceptance had taught me to accept myself. We were all learning together, slow and stubborn. Caleb shared too. He'd grown up in Vermont with 2 sisters and a mother who read novels aloud while stirring soup. His father had a laugh like a porch swing. Their house held a piano that nobody played well, but everyone played anyway. He'd had one serious relationship in his 20s that had been kind, and then had not been kind. The ending was not a catastrophe. It was a slow fade that taught him that honesty should not be rationed. "I learned to be the calm one," he said, eyes on his tea. "Sometimes I think I learned it too well." "I know that skill," I said, and I did. Many of us do. It keeps peace. It also keeps secrets. "What scares you most?" he asked, looking up. "Hurting you," I said without drama. "Or hurting me. Or turning home into something careful and tight where joy can't stretch." He nodded. "Same." He squeezed my hand. "My favorite thing about this apartment is that we give each other room. I'd like to keep that." "Deal," I said. And then, because I am a believer in naming the bright things aloud, I added, "I like you, Caleb. In the way, I meant in that memo. In the way where I hear your key in the door and my whole day feels held together." He smiled and a tiny crease appeared near his left eye, like a bookmark marking a favorite page. "I like you too," he said. "In the way where your laugh feels like a place I want to visit again. People sometimes think love begins at lightning. Sometimes it begins at lamplight, switched on carefully in a room that was already comfortable. We didn't change overnight. We didn't rush. We kept the best of what we were and added to it. That week, we cooked together more often. That weekend, we sat on the balcony with blankets tucked around our legs, watching the maple gesture to us in the wind like an old friend. I told my sister first. I called her on my walk between the hospital and the tea. "So," I said, pretending, casual, "there's someone." Her squeal made 2 pigeons on the curb reconsider their evening plans. "The roommate?" she asked, and I was not surprised. "Maybe," I said. "Probably it's new and steady." "I like steady," she said, her voice softening into serious. "Send me a photo of his smile so I can approve." Caleb told his best friend, Marcus, who lived out in Western Mass with a dog named Casey and a garden that produced more tomatoes than any human could reasonably handle. Marcus sent back a text that said, "About time," and 3 tomato emojis, which we decided meant something supportive. We did not tell our students or my patients, because that's not how boundaries work. We did not post anything online. We held what we were like a candle near open windows, safe, steady, needing care. One evening, a week after the Bluetooth debacle, Caleb came home with a small plant in a terracotta pot. "It was on sale," he said, setting it on the kitchen table with the seriousness of a doctor delivering test results. "And the guy at the store said it thrives on indirect light and patient neglect." "Ah, a plant after our own hearts," I said. He laughed. "I thought maybe we could share it. A friendship plant. No pressure." It was a pothos, resilient, forgiving, green even in winter. We put it near the window, where the sun came in at an angle that made it glow. I wrote a label on a popsicle stick, "Brave Little Leaf." Caleb rolled his eyes and then took a photo. It became our quiet symbol. When we were tired, one of us would water it. When we were worried, we'd talk near it, as if it could translate our concerns into something simpler. It asked nothing of us but attention. It gave us a growing thing to witness. In medicine, I've learned that growth is often invisible until suddenly it isn't. A wound that looks the same for days suddenly knits. A heart that felt stuck suddenly welcomes new rhythm. The plant was like that. We were too. Not all chapters unfold smoothly. Early in December, a patient I had been caring for took a turn. The details aren't mine to share publicly, but the shape of it is familiar to many. A quiet morning, a small but ominous change, a flurry of interventions that felt like a storm in a room with no windows. When it was over, I found myself in the stairwell clutching the rail, breathing carefully so I wouldn't break into pieces that couldn't be gathered. I texted Caleb 2 words. "Hard day." He responded almost instantly. "I'm here." "Do you want me to wait up?" "Yes," I wrote, my thumb shaking. At home, the apartment lights were soft, not bright. A blanket was draped on the couch like an invitation. The kettle was already on. He didn't ask for details. He didn't treat me like a patient. He sat with me and let the quiet carry what words couldn't. When I did speak, he listened the way he always did, with a steadiness that made the edges less sharp. "Sometimes," I said after a while, "doing everything right still isn't enough." "I know," he said. "In my classroom, sometimes I get it right, and a kid still walks home to a house that isn't safe. It's not the same. But I understand the ache of not being able to fix everything." His hand found mine where it wasn't looking. We didn't call it anything. It didn't need a name. We established a habit that winter. When one of us was out late, the other would leave the porch light on. It's a simple thing, a light, but if you've ever driven down a dark street and spotted a glow with your address under it, you know what it does to your chest. It says, "Someone expects you." It says, "Come home." One night, after a parent-teacher meeting that ran long, Caleb came in with tired shoulders and a smile that had done a lot of work. "I told a parent today that their son is brilliant at asking questions," he said, dropping his bag. "They didn't look convinced, but I think it will stick." "That sounds like a heroic reframe," I said. "It felt like truth," he replied. We had our second Sunday meeting and spoke about pacing. We didn't have a label for what we were, and that felt okay. We were more than roommates, less than a declaration. Or maybe we were exactly a declaration, just not one with a Facebook status. We set another gentle boundary. We'd be brave. Enough to say if something was too fast or too slow, too much or not enough. "Also," Caleb said, a little shy, "I keep thinking about a date, an official one." "Yes," I said, feeling both elated and 17. "I'd like that." "Great," he said, then laughed at himself. "Okay, now I need to plan something that involves food but avoids loud places and allows us to leave if we panic." "I know a place," I said, the relief of solving a problem soothing my nervous system. "There's a diner near the river that has booths like confessionals, pancakes at all hours, Pancakes, he said. An excellent plan. Between the awkward moment and the pancakes, there was Thanksgiving. Neither of us was traveling that year, my schedule, his budget, and our friends formed a small, mismatched family for the day. We gathered in our living room with mismatched chairs and a table extension that creaked like it was narrating its own bravery. The turkey was a turkey. The sweet potatoes were generous with marshmallows. Someone brought a green bean casserole that apologized for itself and then was adored. People told stories that felt like lanterns. Marcus drove in with Casey the dog and spent the first hour apologizing for the time Casey had eaten an entire ball of yarn. Our neighbor, Joy, came with cranberry sauce and a laugh that could carry a tune. She had lost her wife the previous winter, and this was her first holiday without her. We saved her a seat next to the plant, and the plant behaved. During dessert, Caleb and I moved like people who'd learned each other's rhythms. He knew I'd reach for the whipped cream before the knife. I knew he'd forget where he set his fork. At one point, our fingers brushed across the table, a small touch hidden in the noise. No one looked twice, or if they did, their faces were kind. Family, Joy said, raising her glass. The kind you're born into and the kind you build. We all raised ours. I looked at Caleb, and he looked at me. And we both understood that some buildings take time but are worth the wait. The porch light, the weekly meetings, the plant by the window, each was a beam. Each held the roof. The diner was everything. We hoped vinyl booths, a waitress who called us hun, and pancakes big enough to double as blankets. We went on a Tuesday because Tuesdays are underdogs and deserved a win. The river outside moved like a thought jotting itself in a journal. We ordered coffee and the kind of breakfast that makes you feel like a kid after a snowball fight. Then we started talking about everything and nothing, the way you do on first. Dates when you're trying to show the shape of yourself without handing over the whole blueprint. What's your favorite hour? He asked. 4 a.m, I said, surprising myself. Quiet, honest, the city whispers then. He nodded. 10 p.m, he said, the hour where stories end well. What did you want to be when you grew up? I asked. A mailman, he said, grinning. I thought delivering mail made you a bringer of news, which I guess. He gestured at his teacher self. What about you? He asked. What made you choose medicine? The way a hand on a shoulder can. Change a room, I said. And the way science is a language for love if we let it be. He looked at me like I'd just said something he'd been trying to translate. Of course you would say that. We ate pancakes and swapped childhood stories and confessed to the movies that make us cry. We didn't talk about politics because we already knew. We didn't talk about exes because we already had. We talked about now. Near the end, the waitress topped off our coffee and said, "You two look right." We blushed the way freshmen do, but I carried her sentence home like a prescription. By January, Boston remembered it was winter. A storm came in thick and stubborn, one of those snows that rearrange people's plans and priorities for a day or two. The hospital called to say my shift would start early. They didn't want us traveling in the worst of it. I packed a bag with extra socks and granola bars and hugged Caleb at the door. It was the first hug we'd had that wasn't accidental or disguised as shared laughter. It lasted just longer than polite. Be safe, he said, voice in my ear. Text me when you can. At the hospital, the day was a blur of snow boots and beeping and faces behind masks. There is a community that forms in storms, a sense that we're all temporarily living in the same small town. We share stories, of the outside like sailors recounting land. We share granola. We share glances that say, I see how tired you are, and I need you to see it in me too. We breathe, together, steady. Late that night, on a break, I checked my phone. Caleb had sent updates like breadcrumbs. The plant is okay. The neighbor's porch collapsed under the snow, but everyone is safe. I made soup. I shoveled our steps. Halfway, but I'll finish in the morning. I miss your face. The last message came with a photo of brave little Leaf with a tiny paper scarf tied around its pot. I laughed into the empty break room, and a nurse I barely knew looked over and smiled. "Good text?" she asked. "Very," I said. When I finally got home the next afternoon, the building smelled like wet wool and victory. Caleb met me at the door with a towel and the kind of smile that made my bones remember warmth. "Hey," he said, brushing snow from my shoulders as if I were delicate and he'd trained specifically in the care of me. "Hi," I said, a world in the single syllable. We made grilled cheese and tomato soup and sat on the floor by the heater like camp counselors. He told me about how Casey the dog had bounded through snow like a dolphin, and I told him about a patient who had sung a lullaby to the storm and made the entire ward still for a minute. We did not make anything official. We did not need to. The day had made us sturdier. There's a moment in every slow-blooming story when the bloom is undeniable. Ours came on a plain morning in late January. I had a rare Saturday off. Caleb had a stack of essays to grade and a playlist of piano music that made the apartment feel like a reading room. We moved around each other easily, me chopping vegetables, him finding the highlighters he preferred, both of us glancing up more often than we needed to. He stood and stretched, the kind of stretch that makes a person taller. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous, I know." "Proceed with caution," I said, amused. "I want to call this what it is," he said. "Not just a feeling, not just a possibility. I want to try being your boyfriend. If you want that, with all the gentle caution and the Sunday meetings and the plant and the pancakes, with all of it." My heart did not race. It settled. I didn't know it had been waiting for a chair to sit in. "Yes," I said, smiling in a way my face remembered from younger years and then improved upon with experience. "I want that." 2. We didn't post it or announce it to the kitchen appliances, but we told the important parties, brave little Leaf, Marcus and my sister, Joy, who cried happy tears and said, "About time," which was apparently the official endorsement of our circle. We kissed for the first time in the kitchen, between the cutting board and the tea towels. It was gentle, like first steps taken in a room you already know by heart. Nothing cinematic, everything real. I realized then that so much of what I love about medicine is what I love about love. The vital signs that are not numbers, the way people feel when they're seen, the quiet listening and the careful hands. Being loved well is a little like being given a new map to the same city. Streets you thought were dangerous become avenues of possibility. Corners where you used to hurry become places to pause and look around. Caleb didn't fix old hurts. He made room for them to breathe and then to step aside. Some evenings, we practiced naming the old stories we had told ourselves. "I'm too much when I'm stressed," I said. "You're not too much," he said. "You're human. Let's learn your warning signs together." "I take care of people so they won't have to take care of me," he said. "I like taking care of you," I said. "Let me." We went to the grocery store like it mattered because it did. We cooked meals that my grandmother would have recognized and some she would have squinted at. We argued once about the right way to fold bath towels and then laughed at ourselves for pretending it was about towels. We learned the difference between solitude and withdrawal. We practiced the sentence, "I need a little time," in a tone. That didn't make the other feel exiled. The Bluetooth speaker became a character in our story. We made rules. Check the connection before playing anything. The old memo stayed on my phone. I didn't delete it. It had saved me from myself. Sometimes we laughed about that night. Sometimes we grew quiet in gratitude. The apartment felt the way good clinics do on a calm day, humming, purposeful, kind. By March, the snow receded like an apology and crocuses nosed up brave and small. We opened the windows and let the city in. It smelled like wet earth and new ideas. Caleb declared it spring cleaning weekend, which meant we found all the missing socks and admitted that the Tupperware cabinet was holding a grudge. We divided tasks with a kindness we'd practiced all winter. He sorted books by the logic of his heart. I vacuumed under the couch like it held secrets. We played music that made the plant dance, if plants can dance, which I think they can. In the back of the pantry, we found a bag of flour that expired. In a presidency ago, and a jar of cloves that had fossilized. We laughed like people who were making space on purpose. In a box on the top shelf of my closet, I found an old photo of me at 22, standing in front of a hospital wing named after a person whose life's work had been giving. I looked, young and exhausted and brave. I showed it to Caleb, and he took it in like an art critic who loves you. "You were doing good work even then," he said. "You just know your hands better now." We did small new things. We ordered a rug for the hallway that pretended to be a sunset. We added hooks by the door for scarves because Boston weather prides itself on surprise. We started a shared list on the fridge titled "Things That Make Us Feel Alive," and we added items as if we were collecting shells, fresh peaches, letters from students, the smell of rain in the subway. That morning, we discovered the farmers' market opens early in April. As spring took the city in its gentle hands, we learned to hold the future without trying to drag it into the present. We talked about next year and about next Tuesday with equal regard. We wondered whether we'd always live in Boston or if Vermont might be in our story late in the book. "I could teach anywhere," he said. "And hospitals are everywhere people are born and get older and break their bones and fall in love." I thought about the porch light we turned on for each other and how I wanted to carry that habit into every house we'd ever live in. He thought about a garden and how brave little Leaf needed siblings. We didn't make promises we couldn't keep. We made daily promises we could. One night, when the sun stayed up long past dinner time like a kid who'd negotiated extra minutes, we took a walk by the river. The water had that fast, purposeful look it gets in spring. We found a bench and sat, our shoulders touching, the city moving around us with its own private music. "Sometimes I think about the version of us that didn't have the Bluetooth mistake," Caleb said. "Do you think we would have found our way anyway?" "I like to think so," I said. "But I also think life is generous with doorways. That one was clumsy and unforgettable. It saved us some time." He nodded. "I like our time," he said. "I do too," I said. "I like our time very much. The trusted doctor part of me wants to leave you with a prescription. Something you can take should you ever find yourself standing in a hallway, your heart playing through a speaker you didn't intend to use. Here's mine. Be gentle with your brave. Let it speak in a voice you'll recognize. Steady, kind, unhurried. Leave the porch light on for yourself and for the people who love you. Practice listening. Practice asking, 'Are you okay?' Even when the answer isn't simple. That awkward moment with my roommate changed everything because it introduced us to the version of honesty we both needed. It reminded us that the best homes are not built on certainty. They're built on care. We learned to balance our story like a tray of teacups, moving slowly enough not to spill. We learned that love can begin in a clumsy confession and grow into a calm, strong daily practice. The Bluetooth speaker is still on the shelf. The plant is thriving. The couch has seen more laughter than I can count. Caleb still writes notes, in the margins of essays like he's speaking directly into young hearts. I still keep voice memos, but now some of them are shorter because I say more out loud. We're not perfect. We forget to defrost the chicken. We misread each other and then apologize. We roll our eyes at our own habits and then keep them because they belong to us. But when I think about the awkward moment that started this chapter, I feel grateful past what words can carry. It cracked something open. It asked us to choose, and we did. So here we are, two men in a city that holds many stories, living one of them with care. If you're listening to this and your heart is pressing up against something you haven't said, I offer you our lamplit kitchen, our Sunday meetings, our porch light. You are allowed to feel what you feel. You are allowed to speak. And if your voice trembles, that's just the truth excited to be heard. We still take evening walks. We still stop by the shop with the hand-painted sign that promises guitars and good advice. We haven't yet asked for advice because most days our path feels clear enough. Wake, work, care, cook, listen, laugh, tend, rest. When we need help, we'll ask. In the meantime, we keep showing up for one another. Slowly, steadily. One last thing. On the first warm Saturday of spring, we took the plant onto the balcony and repotted it. It had outgrown its container, roots circling like careful plans. We loosened them gently, gave them room. Caleb brushed soil from my cheek like a story he wanted to finish. We went inside and made pancakes because it felt ceremonial. The new pot sat by the window like a small celebration. When people ask me, at the hospital or at the cafe or in the elevator, how I am, I tell them the truth in a way that fits the moment. Good, I say. Grateful. Both are clinically accurate. Both get to the heart of it. The life we're building is not extraordinary. By cinematic standards, it is ordinary in the way that matters.